Okay, welcome to the new setup. I know it's been a really long time, but I wanted to basically fill you guys in. The point of this video is I'm gonna update you guys on what I've been doing the last year. I basically haven't consistently streamed really at all since September of 2023. That's when basically I picked up my life within a week and moved to America and began pursuing immigration and starting this like new business with Steven and stuff. Because of that, my life for the past year has really been incredibly unstable. My living situation has been, I wouldn't say unstable, more like unpredictable, which has led to just a lot of issues as far as like knowing when to set up a studio, because it takes a lot of work to like build this space, at least for me. I know some people are really fast at it. I am not. I'm very picky. I come to conclusions decently slowly, and I think, especially you've probably seen when I make knee-jerk reactionary conclusions, they tend to be not my best thought, not my best thinking demonstrated, whereas when I'm slower and more methodical, I tend to just come up with better conclusions, and I think I just in general process a lot better when I have a bit of time. So what have I been up to in the last year? Well, for those of you who have been like completely disconnected from my channel, Brianna Wu invited me to come speak to Rokana in early October of 2023. And it was right around the time when Nick and I were looking at moving to Florida anyways to pursue the podcast with Steven in person, as well as just being in America to also go on Fresh and Fit more often, which never actually worked out, not on their fault, on mine. And just to go on podcasts more often. That was the original plan. So then when Brianna Wu invited me to come and talk to Rokana, I was like, you know what? I've got a week, but I should do it. So I basically packed up my PC, my laptop, mic system, like a big bag of clothes, and I basically drove across America. For the first little bit, slept in my car so that I could flip everything up on its side, and there'd be like this narrow passageway in the back of my SUV crossover. It's not quite an SUV, but it's a hatchback that's a little bit enlarged. And I would roll a camper mat out and a sleeping bag, and I'd tuck myself into my car, put on a sleeping mask, and sleep in my car in like parks and stuff. I did not sleep very well, just because I was like constantly nervous of just like people walking up to the car. I was alone. I arrive in DC. Luckily, I have a hotel. I get to sleep. I get very little sleep though. It was like 2 days from, no, I think it was 3 days from Redwater, Alberta. That's where I used to be. Doxed now. Then I stayed with a friend in Chicago for a night, and then I went directly from Chicago to DC. We did the whole Rokana thing. That's when basically I think I got more on Progressive Victories. There was originally a plan in DC. There was the panel, I'm sure you guys saw, with Emma Vigeland, Vaush, Destiny, talking about basically how to unite the left and how to motivate people. And I was supposed to be on the panel hosting the conversation. I built up all the questions. I was approved to go on. And the reason I was there is because Brianna got sick that morning. And then literally last minute, 2 staff members, I won't name names or anything like that because I'm the streamer and they don't have a voice necessarily, pulled me off and were like, you can't go up there. And the reason was because there was there's probably like 5 really loud, angry, like Demon Mama-esque fans that felt some way about Destiny being involved at all, and they were worried that if I went up, it would look like PV was biased towards Destiny because I'm friends with Destiny and I was the one moderating the panel. So they thought it would like look more biased. What ended up happening is they all went up. Everyone was expecting me to be there, including the speakers. And then there was just like Destiny, a seat, and then Sam, who was moderating in my place, Vaush, and Emma. So it was like the worst of all worlds. It was terrible. It was really awkward. I walked in like midway through and like my face was on the poster behind like to be moderating, and I was just like, anyways, in fairness, the people apologized since then for the call. It was the worst call ever. And somehow after that, I was like, you know what? I believe in PV anyways. And I decided to start working with PV specifically because they expressed a strong interest in working with DGG, and I wanted to kind of be there to somewhat advocate for DGG, but also advocate for like what in general that atmosphere of kind of left-leaning liberal speakers and thinkers would want in an organization. And I saw a lot of potential in the organization. So at that point, I was offered an actual job doing event planning. yeah, just was this really awesome situation where basically I had a more steady income while I was working on building stuff up here. And the original plan was that when I got here, this house that I'm in is my friend owns a number of rental properties, and this is one of the rental properties that he was renovating. And he was really kind, basically offered for us to move into this house when it was finished renovating. And because Nick has a really good eye for aesthetic, especially, he was like, you guys can have a fair bit of say on like what the house looks like. The contractors promised that the house would be done in November. The permits didn't ever get pulled properly, despite us telling the contractors that they needed to get permits for the work. And then the city shut down the work until the permits had gone through. So we had about a 3-month lapse of just waiting for permits to go through. So originally we were going to move directly from my friend's house that we were staying like with him at his house to this house. And that obviously wasn't going to happen. So he had another house that had just opened up, just had his previous renter move out, and he's like, why don't you move into that house? That house was the one I was in previously. It's really small. I'm really blessed that he let me stay in there. Just to be clear, none of this is ever going to be a complaint about the situation. I fundamentally was given a house to stay in for like a year at basically like minimal cost. Like I covered utilities and that was it. And it was amazing. The problem is that the house is pretty old and there's a really big problem with termites in the house. And to be clear, my friend pays like bi-weekly Terminix stuff, but apparently the termites that are there are like pretty much impossible to get rid of. You can only like manage them unless you like fully incubate the whole house. And we had nowhere to go. So that was not really an option. And it's like 20 grand. And we're like, you don't need to spend 20 grand for us. Like it's fine. We'll just put up with the termites. So we started living in that house. It was like 2-bedroom, but the entire time the contractors would keep saying, like, next month you'll be moving in, next month. And so it was like January, and they're like, don't worry, February 20th was the day we were given. And then it was like March 6th, and it just kept getting bumped and bumped and bumped. And so this whole time I'm like, I could spend the money that I need to like set up a studio in the termite house, but I really don't like it. The room that I was in was pretty unideal. I'd have to do a lot of like, I'd need to put like rugs and stuff up. It was just a really open, large, like echoey room. And so I would need to do a fair bit of work, and the lighting in that room was horrible. So I'd have to do a lot to set up to just make it look kind of aesthetic and soundproofed, basically. And because they kept saying it'll happen next month, I was like, I'm just not going to put in the money. We're going to wait, and we'll get it next month. And the whole time that we're living in Termite House, you need to remember all of our stuff is still in Canada. When you're coming on like traveler's visa, unsurprisingly, they don't love you traveling in the States if you like bring a U-Haul with like a bed and like housing furniture. It makes them believe you're not just traveling, which is fair. So we were living for a while because there's a number of things. Number one, our immigration was promised to be done by February. It was not. Number two, we thought the house we'd be moving into, this house, would be done by February, then March. It was not. So we can't ship our stuff from Canada until I have a visa number. That's what's going to be required to ship our stuff. So the whole time we keep thinking immigration, it's going to happen anytime soon. We don't want to have to buy like a whole new wardrobe and a whole new house. So for probably 5 months, we're living off of paper plates and plastic forks and like 2 pans that our friend borrowed us, until finally we're like, okay, this is like nightmare fuel. Like this doesn't work. So we bought like a couple plates, like 2 bowls, a cutlery set, and like 1 extra pan. But again, we have like a really nice kitchen set at home. Like we're waiting to bring our stuff from Canada. Needless to basically say, the house that we're supposed to be moving into, we only got into in October of this year. So it was like a whole year delayed in getting into it. Whole bunch of problems. There's still problems. 10 out of 10. Would never recommend working with the contractors that we worked with. They are genuinely terrible, lazy pieces of crap who are unquestionably skyrocketing the prices to take advantage of my friend. I'm like, they're the worst, literally the worst. And Sulak, you know what? You can decide if I should keep that in there. Okay, you're gonna be my final wall of defense. We still have problems like the lights, just all the wiring. We paid for like the highest end wiring so that we knew that with all the electronics and stuff that we have, that we would just be Gucci, except whoever like installed the actual like light plugs. This is what I've been told by another electrician. Somebody in the comments tell me if this is wrong. But if we have too many lights on our power, especially if I put the blow dryer in the bathroom upstairs, everything in the house will flicker a little bit, which is crazy because we have like high grade wiring throughout the entire house. And it's just, an electrician was basically like, the wiring's pretty good. There's nothing like specific. It's probably just like a kind of a mid to crappy job. There's probably a couple of errors, but to fix it, we'd have to like potentially like go through all of the wiring in your house, which we can't afford to do that because that would be like 30 grand plus then you'd have to fix the walls. Anyways, nightmare situation. But we still love the house. Just to be clear, we love the house. It's just the contractors are garbage. And so the whole year was with the house was fighting with the contractors. But when you fight with contractors who are actively working on your project and have taken your money, you don't want to be a caustic asshole and have them fuck you over. So you need to like fight with them in like sneaky, smart ways so that they like you enough that they'll keep doing the work that you need them to do and not like fuck you over in some way that you don't know. Especially in Florida where it seems like it is really hard to hold any professional accountable for their crappy work. So that was like one thing going on for us was just like, didn't really have a home. The house we were living in was kind of termite infested. So we would like wake up and my desk would be like covered in like these like little brown speckles, which is basically like termite shit. It's mostly wood, but it's gross. At nighttime in the fall and spring, they would have these little breeders come up and they'd fly through the house and they're just like these like maggots with wings. They're horrible and they'd like hit your mirror and then they'd like fall and like wiggle around. So like we would literally turn off the lights and like hide in our bedroom. Yeah, it was awful. Hated that house. But again, blessed to have it. Just to be very clear, still very blessed to have had it. Yeah, the generosity of my friend has been like incredible. That's what was going on with the house. We had like this, not unstable because we had like a perfectly normal house to live in, but it was hard to know if I wanted to invest the money to like build up the studio and make it look okay-ish to stream from. Because we just kept on thinking next month we'll be in the new house. And obviously this house is much more beautiful. We had a lot of say. We've got like black walls, white floor, white ceiling. We were at this point having to buy furniture because it's been like 6 months with no furniture. So we were buying furniture in the colors that we wanted. And so that was one major thing kind of driving a delay in streaming and just kind of like making creative work in general really difficult. Immigration. When I called the immigration lawyer, they were like super high review, 800 reviews, like 4.9 stars. I was like, perfect. I wanted to work with the best immigration lawyer because I knew that I had a bit of a weird situation. Got connected, and basically when I first talked to them in October, so this is like a week after I've arrived in America, I'm like, this is my plan. I'm going to like be on a visitor visa, do like podcast stuff and YouTube, and I'm going to make money through my YouTube while I do like podcasts and stuff in the area. How do I immigrate while I'm here for the 6 months that I can be here? And we came up with this plan. It's called an E2 investor visa, basically because I was starting a business with Steven for bridges. I could use that as basically a sponsor business of me. If I own 50% of that business, basically I'm considered an investor and I can come into the country and work for 5 years. So I'm not an immigrant. I'm a non-immigrant working visa. Plan made. And so basically they're like, however, this is what the lawyer told me. We can't even start on this process until you've been in the country for 90 days. So the next 90 days, just like chill, hang out, start working on building up your company a little bit and call me. 90 days was like end of December. She's like, call me like early January and we'll start making a plan. It should take about 2 weeks to finish your application. We'll send it in and you should have your immigration done by like 2 months after that. And I was like, that seems really fast and crazy. But okay. Hindsight. Get a second opinion. That was crazy talk. Also, the 90-day stuff, not real. Afterwards, I talked to them about it when I was like, hey, you guys told me to wait 90 days before I started anything. They just were like, oh, we don't remember saying that. I'm like, okay, well, I do because I have it in my notes. I wrote it down and followed your prescription of what I needed to do. So anyways, when you're immigrating and you're looking for lawyers, get a second opinion, always. Just always, and check what the first person said to you against the second person. And if there's a discrepancy, get a third person's opinion before you go forward with selecting a law firm. I will not name the law firm that I worked with. 90 days goes by. I give them a little call and I'm like, okay, let's get started. And they're like, okay, so we need this, 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 and this from your business. And I was like, I don't have any of those things. And they're like, why not? I was like, because you told me that I couldn't do anything for 90 days. And they're like, oh no, you couldn't begin the immigration application for 90 days, but you could be doing all of your business pre-set up. And I was like, you pretty explicitly told me nothing. So I have been waiting this entire time. Like at this point, I didn't have an LLC formed because I was told to just wait for 90 days. And then because I even asked them, I was like, should I be starting like business stuff? Should I be like incorporating and stuff? And like, no, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Give yourself like the 90 days to really figure out like what you want to do with the business. We'll figure it all out then. So that's what we did. We kind of like figured it out, which is good because in many ways the show shifted a little bit and like what we were originally going to do in the direction and stuff. And so by the time I called them, I actually have a pretty good idea of what we want to be doing as a business. I'm ready to go. And they're like, oh, well, you need to get licensed and you need to incorporate as an LLC, which takes like 3 to 4 weeks minimum. And I was like, that's not good. And they're like, yeah, if you call them, they will expedite your LLC incorporation. And so I call them and they're like,
no, we don't do that.
That's not a thing. You can't like, no, we get to it when we get to it. There is like no expediting. I imagine if you have some nepotistic connection, there's a way you could expedite. But basically I called like 4 times and every single person I talked to at the Sunbiz Incorporation, whatever, was like, yeah, no, this doesn't happen. So problem 1, that's going to take 4 weeks. I also need to apparently have an LLC, have a bank account set up, have the bank account running for a few months so it shows that the business is like live and successful. And then I need to invest, I won't say how much, but a certain large quantity of money into the bank account of the business. And I was like, great, that also would have been good to know in October when I called you. So that takes a while to figure out. I've got to sell off a number of assets, do a number of things. I need to wire the money over, but at this point my debit card had been lost or stolen. I can't remember which it was, but I didn't have it. And to get a replaced debit card for a Canadian is a nightmare when you're not in Canada because they don't want to ever ship it out. And I basically was on the phone with TD Bank for like probably 4 days talking to just levels of escalation of like investigators and everything until finally I just met like a pretty high up supervisor who felt really bad for me. And she was like, I got you. I'm going to take care of this. We're going to ship it to you. I'm going to send you a form to basically like waive our liability that if we mail your debit card and it goes to the wrong location, like we're not responsible. Signed all that shit. Got my debit card so that I could do all the money exchanges like online. Once I have the debit card, it turns out it's still not great. I still have to go home and wire stuff. And now at this point, I've been in the country for 6 months. Plan was to apply for an extension. Basically, you apply for an extension. It takes a really long time and it gives you several extra months to basically maintain your visitor visa. So I'm filling out the information that my lawyer asked for the extension. And I noticed that an issue where I'm like, it says that I came into the country in October, which is correct, but it's saying that I have to leave by 2022. It was my I-94. And I was like, this seems wrong, but that was my most recent I-94 that you get on like the government website. My lawyer calls me in a panic and goes, that was the wrong I-94. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, that isn't the correct I-94. And I was like, that's I-94 I sent you like 3 months ago. And the one that you told me to find. And that's what you told me to get. And he's like, yeah, I didn't check the dates. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, I'm going to look into your last port, but I'm pretty sure you've got to leave the country today because you might be overstaying your visit. And I was like, great. My mom had literally just arrived for Easter. And the next day I was like, well, we got to fly home. So I fly to Montana. My dad very kindly drives across Montana, picks us up, drives us across the border. We get home and my lawyer advises me stay in Canada for like a month. So pros of this, there's a bunch of wire money transferring that has been a nightmare to do from my Canadian to my American account, to my American business account. that now that I'm home in Canada, I can just go right in and do. So I go into the bank, I wire transfer the very large amount of money directly to my business account in America. So check, one of the biggest things for my immigration, done. You know, pros, I got to see my parents and family. Cons, my family's not doing super well right now. It's very stressful. I was away from Nick for a month because he had come a lot later than me, so he was still good to stay, and that our dog was down there at this point. Like, we couldn't just up and leave. And while I'm there, I at least have like this focus time, and I just finish like everything and anything to do with the immigration application. I get a whole bunch of ducks in rows. I finish some of the schooling stuff that I needed to get like cleared up and out of the way. I just get like, basically I just power through and get a bunch of work done in the month that I'm away. And so in April, like 6th or 7th, like right early, as soon as I get there, I send my lawyer everything, and I'm like, application done, good to go. Please send it off so I can apply for immigration. And he's like, bet. We get to the end of the month of April. I'm like, hey, just checking in. You haven't really gotten back to me. I'm assuming you've sent my immigration papers. And then my lawyer gets back to me. He's like, sorry, I didn't actually check over anything. Let me check it over now. I'm like, it's been a month, motherfucker. Like, hello? He checks it over and he's like, actually, I need these documents. And I was like, they're in there. And then I screen cap the documents that he's looking for. And he's like, oh, I actually want a couple more of these and these. So I find a couple of extra documents and put those in there too. And we're like going back and forth. He keeps asking for things. And I'm like, I already have this. And he's like, no, you don't, because of such and such. And I'm like, why didn't you include this in the original list that you gave me? I did everything on your original list, so just include that. So anyways, we're going back and forth. He tells me I can go back to America in like June, in May. I go back to America in May. Still hasn't filed the paperwork, by the way. And then I'm like emailing him, being like, I've done everything. And he's like, yeah, we've done everything. We're going to send it off right away. And I'm like, can you send it today? Like, is there a button you have to hit? Like, what's the process here? Why am I paying you $8,000? Like, please send it, please, God. And finally in July, my paperwork gets filed. So just a massive delay, for not really any good reason. I probably should have just escalated to his like boss. I did once like include his boss in an email list, but the boss never responded, and he like had plausible like reasons as to like, he was like, I know it's taking a long time, but I have a lot of clients and you were delayed on getting me like this and this and this and this. So like, you know, he like kind of like was able to like shift the blame off of me. And I was like, well, I don't want to piss off my lawyer because I need my immigration paper file and I cannot afford to pay another $8,000. And at this point, I'd also had to buy out my car for my immigration because I was leasing my car from a Canadian leasing agency or whatever. So I had to drop like $12,000 for my car. Like, there was just so many crazy expenses. I had to fly home. I still wasn't streaming, so I wasn't making that good of income. I was working full time with PV, thank God. Trying to get bridges started. I'm having to miss a bunch of episodes because I'm in Canada stuck. And so I'm just like, please send it. It's sent in July. We get notified finally in mid-August that paperwork had been received and was being processed, but the U.S. Embassy Consulate had fully restaffed and they needed 2 months to process any paperwork. It's supposed to take like 10. You're supposed to get an interview time 10 days after they receive your application. So they received my application August. I get an email early October being like, when do you want to come for your interview? And I was like, fuck. So I'm looking through the days of the interviews available. And I know that when you go, they take your passport and it's anywhere from 3 to 10, but they say like, assume on the higher side of 10, like 10 to 13 days before you get your passport back and you can come back to America officially immigrated. So I'm looking at the days that are available, and I think the soonest day was like October 27th. And I'm like, that if we have the election night stream, November 6th, which is like a big deal for this studio. That's like the biggest event we've hosted. And I don't want to miss it. And I'm like, if I book my visa interview, because I have to go to Canada and Toronto for this, in end of October, if there's a chance, there's a small chance that I won't have my passport back in time and I'll miss the stream. And I'm like, I can't do that. So there's one day available, November 7th. So that's the day after the election stream. or was it November 8th? No, it was November 8th because I knew that I needed to travel the next day. So there's one day, November 8th, that's available. And I'm like, I'm going to do that. That way I can finish the election stream. It'll probably finish at like 2 to 4 a.m., can sleep, get on a plane and fly back to Toronto for like 5 hours on a flight. And then get in that afternoon, get time to kind of get settled. I booked a hotel for that night and we'll go to the consulate the next morning and do our immigration stuff. So we do all that, except our flight is delayed by like 4 hours. So instead of getting in at like 6, where we would have time to print off our paperwork because we hadn't printed it off yet, because we didn't want to like carry it all with us on the plane. We were just nervous of anything happening. So we wanted to make sure that when we were printing it, it was going to be like as close as possible. We're just going to go to Staples. We're going to get in at 6, except our flight was delayed by 4 hours. So we get in at 9:30 and Staples is closed and our interview is at 8 a.m. the next morning and Staples doesn't open until 8 a.m. But our visa appointment's at 8 a.m. So that's a conflict. So we stay out all night looking for a printer. Gotta say this, not a big fan of the people of Toronto. Yeah, we called everywhere. We went everywhere. It's crazy. We went to homeless shelters being like, we will pay you $100 just so I can print paper. We bought our own paper. We literally went into places with our own stack of paper being like, we'll pay you for the ink. Please just let us print off like 100 pages for our immigration. And they would say no. They all said no. Literally no one would help us. It was crazy, which is like, I've worked at a homeless shelter. I can't even imagine like just a nice person coming in needing to print and you're like, nah. So anyways, we don't get our shit printed and we're like panicking the next morning because we have our interview and we were told we need to have all of our paperwork printed and ready in person. So we get to the embassy at 7:15 and there's already like a line around the block and we're like, oh, and we go up to this guard. And now to be clear, Toronto people, not very nice. Gotta say, all of the Indian people in Toronto, you are proving immigration is a great thing, okay? They were genuinely always so fucking nice. So nice. We go up to this guard. We're like, hey, our interview's at this time, but we really need to print off. There's a Staples like a block away. Obviously, they know where the U.S. Embassy is. It's a well-placed Staples. And we're like, is there any chance that we'll have time to print this off? And the guy's like, every single person today has an 8 a.m. appointment. It's just because they want to make sure everyone comes as early as possible. There's no rush. Go print your stuff. Honestly, as long as you're back before like 1 p.m., you'll get in today. Don't worry about it. That would have been good to know. Thanks, lawyer. Thanks for informing us about that. So, we go to Staples. We print everything off. We get our passport photos taken and brought in. We go in for the interview. Turns out we don't need any of that paperwork. We needed to print off proof that we had an appointment that day, which we have. Our application number, which is the front page of our application, and passport photos. So we are holding this stack of 175 pages that I had prepped for this application, okay? 175 bank statements, proof of selling assets. We had silver that we had sold. So the invoice for that, invoices for services that had led to me having the savings and assets needed to invest the large amount of money, like all of the bank transfers, proof of contracts with staff, proof of contracts with content creators, photos of the studio, photos of our website, like just everything. 175, a huge document that, in fairness, my lawyer wrote up that was great, that outlined like our entire business plan. We go to the interview. I'm nervous as balls because I've been told like, this is a really intense interview. Do a good job. So I'm standing up there. They wave my husband up because he's considered like an E2 spouse. So he's not the main one for the interview. And the guy that's interviewing me is getting trained. And there's like 3 people behind him, like evaluating every one of my statements. And so I'm like so nervous. I'm like, oh God, I hope I don't say anything. Like Lauren Chen is a Canadian who did foreign interference. What if they feel some sort of way about a Canadian doing like political podcasting? Like, like I'm freaking out, right? And it was so easy. They were like super chill. At one point, I saw the girl looking at my channel and then she showed it to all of them and they're like, ooh. And just so you know, notsoErudite channel was like 50K subs, okay? I understand. Small potatoes, unless you're in Canada. Then you're like the most famous person they've ever met, which is crazy because now that I've met like some of the most famous people on the internet, like Harley and Amouranth and like all these people, people treating me like I'm like anyone noteworthy is wild to me because I'm just like so deeply insignificant. But they see my channel, they get kind of excited, they're asking a little bit about the channel, and I'm trying to play a little coy about the politics. They're Americans. I don't know if I've got a Republican, probably not. Because like, what if I'm like, yeah, I like definitely, lean left and I like support like more left-leaning politics. I don't know if they're gonna be like rejected. They're super chill. They looked through a couple of the episodes, they asked me a couple of questions. They want one thing. I have 175 documents that my lawyer told me I had to have prepped. I had gone through, I triple checked my list, okay? I had been extremely pedantic about this. And they're like, we need your marriage certificate to prove that you're married to Nicholas Turner. You know what was not on the list that I needed for this interview in person? A fucking marriage certificate. They didn't even look at my stack of papers. They didn't even crack it open. They didn't need anything. They didn't care because it was all sent in electronically, except for my fucking marriage certificate. So they're like, okay, you're approved, Kyla. You're completely approved. Take my passport. You should get your passport in like 3 to 10 days. Nicholas, you're approved pending we get the marriage certificate. They show me the website to send it to in the email. We go home. It's the first thing I do, obviously. Now we're done. Now we're just waiting. We get like an email saying that like our application has been processed. And then I think the next day we get an email letting us know as well that the Bridges has been approved as a E2 sponsor company or whatever. Great. So we're good to go. We're excited. And now we just have some time in Toronto to hang out and catch up on sleep because we'd had very little sleep in like the months leading up to the election, and just like spend time, Nick and I, because to be honest, like leading up to the election, I was working between PV and Bridges and stuff. I was probably working 60 to 70 hours a week minimum. And the reality is like I just really had minimal time for Nick. When we were spending time together, I was just so tired that I don't think I was giving him like high quality time. And quality time is a really, really big thing for Nick specifically as like a love language. And so, when we were like talking about it, I'm like, I'm really sorry, but I am really looking forward to Toronto because we'll just get to spend time together. We do have a couple of good nights. We go to this really cool, it's called Jack on Fiddle. It's downtown Toronto, super good food. Nick and I have this like firm belief that strangers are just friends you haven't met yet. So we meet these people sitting near us because they bond. The waitress connects us because Nick loves fruity girl drinks. And the guy sitting across from us with his friend loves fruity girl drinks. And he's trying to convince his other friend to drink fruity girl drinks with him. They won't. Anyways, we end up all sitting together and eating and chatting. They're awesome. We're friends now. The one of them is probably going to come down and visit us at some point. So we just like make these friends. We go out, we go back to his house or his apartment in downtown Toronto, get way too drunk, especially them. Oh my gosh, they were so drunk. And then the plan was basically we're going to go visit my aunt who lived just near Toronto for like the weekend. And then the plan was to come back into Toronto and stay with possibly JREG in the studio, maybe book like a Airbnb for like 4 to 5 days until we get our passport and then go home. We get to my aunt's house. We have dinner. We meet like the extended family. She's technically my second cousin. I call her my niece because the age differences make more sense to use that language. She's like 8 and she's me. She is me. I've never met my niece before. She's 8 years old. We are the same human being. She's so funny. She's so spicy. We were like memeing back and forth. We kept on just like she knows like all the internet memes to a scary degree. Like her favorite thing to chant is like big back, big back. And I'm like, I don't know if you even know what that means. Anyways, we bond super quickly. We make plans to hang out like the rest of the weekend. So she stays over. We get to hang out with her the whole weekend. It's a really great time. And then I get sick. So I start with getting my like neck is kind of sore and getting swollen. I'm like, oh, I probably have a flu or a cold. I don't know if you know, there's research on actually like how cortisol during like high stress. So there's a really common phenomenon for students when they finish their exams that they'll go through like a drought of like really intense sickness and flu when they weren't sick the entire semester. It's because when you're like super high stress and high cortisol for a long time, when that thing happens, you finish your last final, your cortisol drops, stress is over, but also your immune system tanks with it, and you kind of bounce down and have to bounce back up to like your baseline of your immune system. So it's really, really common that when people go through like high stress situations and then that high stress ends, you do a final, the election stream happens, and you pass your visa immigration meeting, your immune system often tanks, and mine did. So I start getting sick, and I'm like, hey, I'm sick. Nick is sick as well. And we're like, you know what? My aunt is super chill. It's free. It's not much to do. We'll just stay at my aunt's until we feel better. And then I just get more and more sick. At one point, I wake up and my neck is like completely swollen and my eyes are like swelling shut. And I'm like, I think I need to see a doctor. We go into Toronto to do an interview with JREG because I told them I'd go on their podcast. And at this point, my face is swollen. And I was like, Nick, what if I look like fat and swollen? And he's like, it's okay, wear a mask. Which I didn't end up wearing the mask for the interview. They said it was okay. But yeah, I end up really, really, really sick. And I go to the doctor, which was a headache because I had my Alberta healthcare number. That's like the insurance number for basically the universal healthcare that I need to have my healthcare covered. And I had it written down, but because I didn't have a physical card, because Alberta doesn't really give out the cards anymore, and I haven't kept my card because I've been traveling so much, I just have it on my phone. No one would take me. They're like, these stupid receptionists were like, we need to scan it. And I was like, no, you don't. You can go to Netcare and put my name in there and my insurance number. And as long as the insurance number matches my name, I had every other piece of ID possible. I didn't have my passport. I had my driver's ID. I had my birth certificate on my phone. I had my insurance card. I was like, please just let me see a doctor. And they just wouldn't let me see a doctor. So I tried like 6 different medical centers until finally one lady, I was just like, please. And she was like, well, I really need to scan the document. And I was like, no, you do not. I have my Netcare open on my phone. I can tell you everything about myself and all the last medications I've had since I was a baby because it's on my phone. You don't need it. Please, I need to see a doctor. And I pull my mask down. And I'm like, look how swollen I am. My eyes are swelling shut. Please let me see a doctor. And I sound like horrible at this point. And she's like, okay, fine. I see the doctor. He's like, yep, you got strep and bronchitis. Great. I get some antibiotics, start taking that. Takes a while. Start getting better. In the meanwhile, we're waiting for my passports. Where are our passports? Well, as luck have it, so the passports are taken by the US Embassy, they're stamped with our visa, and then they're given to Canada Post, which is it's basically like a public sector. You guys have it here, right? Like United States Postal Service, USPS or whatever. I don't know, the one that's government funded. We have that. It's called Canada Post, and everyone hates it. And I completely hate it now. So the US Embassy gives my passport to Canada Post, and Canada Post takes it to their central Toronto hub, and I go in downtown to pick it up so that I don't have to wait. I can pick it up within like a day. So my passport is released November 12th. Stamped, released to Canada Post. Canada Post begins shipping it. November 14th, I am told it will arrive Friday, November 15th, at this location. I'm like, great. Friday, we go to that location, and it's closed. And then we go to where it tells you to go to pick up parcels that are supposed to be delivered by Canada Post, which is the local shoppers. And it's the shopper staff running it. And they're like, yeah, there's a strike. And I was like, no fucking way. When did it start? And they're like, today. So the day that our passports were supposed to be delivered was the same day Canada Post went on strike, which is like, they're allowed to go on strike. I'm not like, it's just cosmic injustice. It's just crazy. And so we're like, fuck. Is there any way to get our passports? And the shoppers staff were like, nah. So we spend the next 3 days calling everyone. everyone, trying to be like, is there a way to go back to America with a temporary passport? Is there a way to get our passports? Could we go to the location that it's kept at? I'm calling everyone. I'm getting like supervisors to supervisors. I know like all of the details, like where it was, at what time it got delivered to the Toronto depot, why it didn't get shipped out on the 15th. It wasn't actually precisely loaded in the truck. It was brought close to the truck, but not put into the truck. And then the truck closed and the strike started the next morning. So I know everything about my passport. The problem is I cannot get in there because when it's on strike, the union is obviously not working. And if the union workers aren't there, then the Canada Post closes its doors. There's no one going in and out. And the depot that my passport is at is by an airport that you basically can't get to as a civilian anyways. Not that like I could go rifling through the depot and be like, I gotta find my passport. That also wouldn't be allowed. I call the union. I call the union president. I call everyone. And everyone's just like, man, that's a tricky situation. So there was one option that we were given, which we could potentially get a temporary passport. The issue is that my lawyer told me do not do that because it will nullify your visa, which we had just gotten. Because as it was explained to me, the visa was attached to my passport number, which is crazy. And so I'm calling around. Finally, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to call a conservative MP. We post on Reddit as well. And they recommend talking to a TSA officer because there is a temporary passport where you basically fill in a form saying, my passport isn't gone. It's just temporarily unavailable, but I'd still like to travel. So we call the MP to try to figure out the details of how to get this. They're incredibly helpful. They're the only helpful person the entire time. Gosh, the union was actual cancer. They started yelling at me, being like, we have rights. And I was like, bruh, I'm not part of this fight. I just want my fucking passport. I just want to go home. I don't even want my passport. I just want to go home. This is why I missed multiple episodes again. And I'm sick throughout the whole process, so I'm grumpy. And then one of the union workers whose jobs for the union is to let postal workers know the number of their local union rep. She's based in Montreal. And I'm asking for the Toronto union rep. And she just is like, I don't know that number. And I was like, there's no way you don't know that number. That's your job. Give me the number. And she's like fighting me. She won't give it to me. And I would be like, I just keep on like Chris Fossing. I'd be like, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to do this? What am I supposed to do? I think at one point I was like, I have a son at home who's sick, autistic or something. I was just like, please give me the info. Then finally, she begrudgingly under her breath gives me the number for the Toronto union rep and then goes, well, what's your number? And so I like give her my number. She cuts me off midway through me giving her number. And she's like, okay, well, now you have it. Do you need anything else? And I was like, no, this is what I've been asking for the entire time for like 10 minutes. The union was dreadful. I am so opposed to public sector unions. I was before, like police unions and stuff. And now fuck all of them. I hope Canada Post burns to the ground and their union. You know what? I hope the union gets violently rejected by the postal workers because they're awful. And they're also negotiating for insane shit that will destroy the company and lose all their jobs. So I hate unions for public sectors now. It's official. Well, I already kind of did, but now it's like not just police. I'm like, yeah, probably all public sectors shouldn't have unions. That's a take for another day though. So finally we call the MP. We find out that we can get a temporary passport. We fill out this form. They give us the specific form that I need, all the info. They help me find the location I need to go to. We get all that info on Wednesday. Thursday, we go in, we get everything completed. The TSA agent that was working with us was fantastic. She was so helpful. She understood that we had like a weird situation. We get what's called a temporary passport that day, and we have a flight out Friday. But I had a community event planned for like months that starts also on Friday. So we land. I'm finally not sick. We get back to America. We get our dog. But all of our friends and community members are landing and like our house isn't set up or prepped or anything. So we spend the next 3 days setting that up and then like setting the house up, putting up the bunk beds and stuff. Then we have a community event. It was super awesome. Then I traveled to Miami for, it was supposed to be 2 podcasts and then none of them happened. And now I'm back. And you're caught up. I'm trying to think if there's anything in between. No, I think that's everything. Sulak, good luck. Let's see. I had questions written out that I should answer for this. Well, what were the big projects or collaborations you worked on this last year? Probably the biggest collaboration was with PV, Progressive Victory. I helped put together, I basically became the chief senior like media staff by the end, where basically I was organizing the like media structure of PV, and helping like run events as well. The events were like the canvassing events. The media was like working with content creators to connect them to senators and get like a certain amount of content put out, and like funneled back to other left-leaning spaces so that they could organically promote if they were interested as well. It's like a whole project which took a lot of work, but it was interesting. Yeah, that's also a whole other video that I have to think about if I'll do. So yeah, between bridges, immigration, trying to get this house figured out, and PV, I have been swamped. And so streaming has just really taken a back seat for me. I've also realized, I think in the process, that I do think streaming is tricky for me because there's a lot of stress that comes with it. I think I enjoy it a lot. When streaming is fun, I really enjoy it, but there's a lot of cons that come with streaming that don't come with like any other type of content creation or back-end management. Specifically like the drama and stuff that comes with it. I'm just not like a drama person. And I think necessarily streaming is live. You're going to say things that are not well put, that people will be upset about. And the problem is that if the streaming space was less like parasitic and toxic, if I like said something on stream and I was like, oh yeah, that's probably not the best thing to say, I could just be like, I mean, yeah, like it wasn't worded the best. I was live. I apologize. Here's like a better way to frame that same point. But because how the space is, if you do that, the clip of you saying I was wrong here will be forever and 100% weaponized against you. So you, to some degree, have to like at all times while you're streaming be thinking about being as mindful about your language as possible, which is exhausting. But also on top of that, to some degree, if you have an opinion, unless you think you genuinely were 100% wrong, even if you said it in like an unideal way, you should probably defend your position. Because there's a lot of like, it feels like social wrestling. It's like high school social wrestling, which doesn't exist in any other space that I've experienced. Like video essayists, not like this. Podcasters, not like this. But the streaming industry, streaming is this like weird amalgamation of like, it's kind of like radio, it's kind of like reality TV, and it's kind of like paparazzi, like all at the same time. And just to be clear, if you enjoy watching that, I get it because I love reality TV. But it can be really stressful to be in the midst of. And I don't know if I'm super good at it. So I've had like probably admittedly like a lower motivation as well. I have a lot of content that I would like to film, that I'm excited to do. I just need to finish setting. I need like a second mic in here. And I need to email a couple of people for a couple of interviews, but I have some extra like pre-recorded concepts that I like to do because I just like that content a fair bit more. So you will be seeing more content from me. I just don't know whether it will be streaming or more pre-recorded, and probably the pre-recorded stuff will probably get its own separate channel. I think the algorithm works a lot better for that, kind of how Lonerbox has it separated. So we'll see if I separate the stream channel from like the pre-recorded, or just like, because I'm gonna do like this new series, I basically want to take my feminizing series and kind of branch that into a pretty deep dive exploration, talking with women about womanity basically, and having like pretty raw, brutal conversations at times. Like I want to talk to like a fundamentalist pastor and be like, this is like how fundamental Christianity I think is like really harmful for women, and I think it's bad, and I don't think it's Christ, and why are you doing this? I want to talk to the sex workers and like get their perspective on like how they might be harming womanity by their work, and like how the beauty standards, how that's impacting other women and what they think about that, how they reconcile with it. So yeah, I want to do that series. I'm really excited. Sounds like Ammo is willing to do it with me. I'm looking right now for a lawyer, a female lawyer, and a couple of other people. I'd really like to get a radfem. Like if I could get radfem Hitler, that would be amazing. But yeah, I think that'll be probably on a second channel. I think that's going to be algorithmically the best bet. Whereas I think probably this channel will stay more dedicated to like culture, like broad culture. My goal for notsoErudite, I have like 3 lenses that I've figured out, which is going to be, and by lenses, I mean, these are the things that I want every single video to be a takeaway from, excluding obviously this video, which is going to be gender, just gender dynamics in general, psychology/science, and metacognition. As you guys know, I'm really concerned with how people think. I want to think well as much as possible. Oh, I didn't even notice that pop bottle there. Well, oopies. Yeah, I'm concerned with how people think, and I want to do more content about that. I think psychology and science is where I'm happiest. I'm pretty burnt out of politics. Again, this is a video for another day as well, but I'm basically I walked away from working with the Democrats being like, if you guys win, you don't deserve it. Fuck you guys. Also Republicans, fuck you too. You suck. All of you politicians, you all suck. All of you political workers, most of you, not very nice people. Don't like the culture. Fuck you guys. But that's a video for another day. I didn't answer any of these questions. Looking forward, finally, what's one thing you hope people take away from your work this past year, even if they didn't see it directly happening? Mostly I hope you guys check out Bridges and enjoy it. That's like where I'm putting a lot of my lifeblood into. I'm really excited about it. I think it's really fun. So I hope you guys watch Bridges, enjoy it, and as always, big hugs, big kisses, think well, and I hope you have a day as wonderful as you are. I'm sure I'll see you guys soon. I'm going to put out a second video exploring more like emotions, feelings, lessons, life lessons, my thoughts about it's more going to be like the psychological, metacognitive, philosophical, interpersonal stuff. So that'll be a second video. I just wanted to kind of recap my year, as chaotic as this video probably was. So enjoy editing it, Zulak.